In his farewell address to the American people on January 17, 1961, President Dwight D. Eisenhower highlighted a far-reaching transformation that had taken place in our nation during his half-century of public service. Until the latest of our world conflicts, Eisenhower noted, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But now we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Eisenhower went on to note that the conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, he said, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, and every office of the federal government. Then came his famous warning. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. Eisenhower's prescient warning about the power and influence of the military-industrial complex serves as prologue to Oliver Stone's 1991 movie about the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Though a decorated war veteran himself, Kennedy, the president, set out on a path to peace. He wanted to end the Cold War in his second term. He signed a treaty to ban nuclear testing. He refused to invade Cuba in 1962. He set out to withdraw from Vietnam. For Oliver Stone, the assassination of JFK was proof positive that Eisenhower's fear of the self-serving power of the military-industrial complex was justified. It's relatively easy to poke holes in the particulars of Oliver Stone's argument, as many have. But his main thesis seems solid. Our standing military, while an obvious political necessity in a dangerous world, is also a ferociously self-perpetuating economic entity. Newly sworn-in President Lyndon Johnson retorted to the Joint Chiefs of Staff in a meeting several weeks after JFK's assassination, "You just get me elected and I'll give you your damn war." Johnson defeated Barry Goldwater the following year, and he quickly expanded the Vietnam War. It took a decade of protest, along with a price tag of nearly $175 billion and 58,000 American lives, not to mention the courage of Daniel Ellsberg and the conspiracy of Watergate to get us out. Make no mistake, I have a sufficiently dim view of humanity at its worst to believe the Beatles are wrong when they blithely sing, "All you need is love." Sometimes you need bombers and sharpshooters. On this Human Rights Sunday, it's worth remembering that human rights are worth precisely what someone is willing to pay in their defense. Many of the rights we enjoy as Americans have been purchased and preserved by the blood of our forebears and the steel of their weapons and their resolve. Nonetheless, Eisenhower's point remains. Given the scope and influence of the military-industrial complex, the potential for the disastrous use of misplaced power will persist. If you're keeping score at home, a bellwether contest to watch in this regard is the current debate over Senate ratification of the New START Treaty. Nearly a century ago, the American philosopher William James gave a speech at Stanford University shortly before his death. In it, James recognizes that the taproot of war runs deep into the psyche and experience of men and nations. In ancient times, he says, men were hunting men, and to hunt a neighboring tribe, kill the males, loot the village, and possess the females was the most profitable as well as the most exciting way of living. Thus were the more martial tribes selected, and in chief and peoples a pugnacity and love of glory came to mingle with the more fundamental appetite for plunder. James goes on to say that our ancestors have bred pugnacity into our bone and marrow, and thousands of years of peace won't breed it out of us. Even so, he says, civilized people should be able to settle their differences without resorting to battle. Common sense and reason ought to find a way to reach agreement in every conflict of honest interest, he says. The problem, however, is that war continually entices with the promise of plunder and prestige. It is also a definitive test of character and courage for those who fight. In battle, soldiers learn to endure private hardship in order to pursue a public purpose, to subordinate individual desires in order to accomplish collective goals, to refract personal distinction into the greater glory of national pride and civic ideals. The risks of war breed courage. The dangers of war breed discipline. The camaraderie of war breeds community. For his part, James longed for the day when men and nations could settle their differences by using reason and common sense rather than carbines and cavalry. Yet he recognizes that even if that day comes, the need will remain somehow to accrue the worthy benefits of war, to develop discipline and courage, selflessness and loyalty, pride and idealism. In other words, we need something that is, as James put it in the title of his speech, the moral equivalent of war. Send people into battle, but against a different kind of foe, such as disease or poverty or the consequences of natural disaster. At least some of the essential elements of military service must apply. The need for personal sacrifice and hardship, the presence of significant risks, the discipline of working alongside others in a common endeavor, the reward of shared accomplishment, or the pain of mutual loss. In proposing a form of national service, James planted a seed that eventually flowered into the Civilian Conservation Corps, founded by FDR to combat the Great Depression, as well as the Peace Corps, which developed from JFK's challenge in 1960 to students at the University of Michigan to serve their country in the cause of peace. Today, AmeriCorps follows a similar pattern.